I still remember the sound of the judge's gavel, not the bang itself, but the silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that hollows out your bones. 10 years. For a crime I didn't even witness. Attempted murder. I stood there numb, staring at the man who put me there, Detective Marcus Hale, watching the corner of his mouth curl, just slightly, like he was proud of what he'd done. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My fiancée slid her ring onto the table without a word. And I realized, in that moment, that innocence doesn't matter when a man with a badge decides you're guilty. Prison didn't break me, it calcified me. It stripped everything soft off my soul. And on the night I was locked in that freezing cell, I whispered the only promise that kept me alive. One day, Hale will understand fear the way he taught it to me. Before we continue the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I love seeing where my stories reach around the world. The night they arrested me started like every other boring Tuesday. I was closing up the small auto shop where I worked, hands still smelling like oil and metal, thinking about nothing more dramatic than whether my fiancée, Lena, had burned the pasta again. My life was simple, steady. I wasn't rich, but I was respected. Customers trusted me, my boss relied on me, my mother bragged about me to anyone who'd listen. I had plans, stupid little plans, saving for a wedding, maybe a bigger apartment, maybe kids in a couple of years. Then blue and red lights painted the street. 2 patrol cars pulled up so fast they almost mounted the curb. Doors flew open. For a second, I thought there was some kind of chase, that the real action was happening behind me. Then I heard it. Daniel Ward. Hands where I can see them. Guns were pointed at me. There's a specific kind of confusion that feels like your brain buffering, like the world is a video on a bad connection. I laughed. Actually laughed. "You've got the wrong guy," I said, the cliché slipping out before I could stop it. They didn't laugh back. They cuffed me against the shop's cold metal shutter. Cheek pressed so hard to it I could smell the old paint and dust. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Someone filmed on their phone. I remember thinking, I've done nothing. This will clear up. This is a mistake. Then I met Detective Marcus Hale. He walked up slow, like he had all the time in the world. No uniform, just a dark coat, shirt open at the collar, tie loose. He had that casual confidence some men wear like cologne. "Daniel Ward," he said, checking a file, though I could tell he already knew everything written inside. Age 28. Mechanic. No record. Quiet life. He looked up at me with a smile that never reached his eyes. Shame. They took me to the station, into a room with peeling paint and a camera in the corner. Hale laid out photos one by one, like playing cards. A woman in a hospital bed. Tubes. Bruises. Blood matted in her hair. "This is Karen Ellis," he said. "Stabbed 3 times in an alley 2 blocks from your apartment. Witness saw you running." I stared at the image. I'd never seen that woman in my life. "I don't know her," I managed. "I was at the shop." "You can ask." "Already did," Hale cut in. "You left early. Around 8. Crime happened at 8:15. Your prints are on the knife we recovered from the scene." The room shrunk around me. "That's impossible." Hale leaned in close enough that I could smell his coffee on his breath. "Nothing's impossible, Daniel. Not when your fingerprints are on the handle and her blood is on the blade." I felt something inside me crack, not break. Not yet, but crack. Because fingerprints don't just appear. Evidence doesn't just arrange itself. And for the first time in my life, I looked at a man with a badge and thought, he's lying. I replayed my day out loud, over and over. The shop. The parts delivery. A late customer. The bus ride home I never actually made because they grabbed me first. Every detail. Every minute. Hale listened with that polite boredom of someone waiting for his food order, not someone deciding the rest of my life. When I finished, he slid a paper toward me. "Confess, and the DA will go easier. Attempted murder instead of whatever else they decide to add." I pushed it back with shaking hands. "I didn't touch that woman." He studied me for a long moment. Then the smile came back, small, satisfied, like he just watched something fall exactly where he wanted it. "Okay then," he said, standing. "We'll let the jury sort it out." And in that instant, without a verdict, without a trial, I knew my life was no longer mine. It belonged to whatever story Marcus Hale decided to tell. Processing felt like being fed through a machine designed to grind the human out of you. Clothes stripped. Fingers inked. Belongings sealed in a plastic bag. Every step reduced me further until I wasn't Daniel Ward anymore. Just inmate 42,791, a number shouted across concrete hallways. The first night, they shoved me into a cell barely wider than my outstretched arms. A metal bunk, a toilet with no privacy, a flickering light that hummed like a wasp trapped behind glass. The door slammed, and the silence that followed was louder than any noise I'd ever heard. I sat on the lower bunk and tried to breathe normally. Tried to convince myself this was temporary, that the system worked, that the truth would surface. But optimism doesn't survive long in a cage, it suffocates faster than hope. My second day I learned how quickly prison strips you of dignity. A guard shoved me during count because I hesitated when he barked my number. Another inmate laughed as my tray slipped from my hands in the cafeteria. One man muttered fresh meat as I walked past. I kept my eyes down, telling myself not to react. Innocence didn't matter here. Weakness mattered even less. But the real damage came from outside. My mother sent one letter. One. It said she loved me but couldn't risk being associated with violence because her church group was already whispering. She hoped I could find peace with God and reflect on the choices that led here. Reflect on what, exactly? Lena didn't write it all. The engagement ring came back in a small padded envelope with no note, just the cold weight of the metal pressing into my palm, like the last piece of the life I'd dreamed about had snapped off and died. For a week, I barely spoke. Ate little. Slept less. Every sound, keys, footsteps, the clang of gates, felt like a nail being hammered deeper into me. I kept replaying the arrest, the trial, the lies. Hale's smug expression. The jurors whispering. The cold certainty in the judge's voice when he sentenced me to 10 years. 10 years for something I didn't touch. By the end of my first month, I'd stopped waiting for anyone to save me. My name was mud, my family gone, my future buried. The system had already decided who I was, and no amount of truth could pry that label off. Then one night, while I sat on my bunk staring at the wall, my cell door clicked open. A guard stepped aside, and a tall, older inmate with gray in his beard walked in carrying an extra blanket. He tossed it onto my bed without a word, then sat on the top bunk. After a long silence, he said, "You keep looking around like you're waiting for someone to pull you out of here. Nobody comes, kid. Not unless you learn how to survive." I stared up at him. "Why'd you give me the blanket?" He shrugged. "Saw you shaking. Figured you weren't the type who'd last long without a little help." His name was Ronan Briggs, and though I didn't know it yet, he would be the only person in that entire place who didn't treat me like poison. The only one who kept me from disappearing completely. And the only stranger who would change the course of my life. Ronan wasn't the kind of man you approached unless he allowed it. He moved through the block with a quiet authority, the sort that came from surviving more years behind bars than most inmates survived outside. People respected him, or feared him. Sometimes both. But with me, he was something else entirely. He never asked why I was there. Not once. That mattered more than I could explain. One morning during chow, he sat across from me without inviting himself, just dropped his tray and started eating like we'd been doing this for years. After a few minutes, he asked, "You fix things on the outside, right? Cars?" I nodded. "Yeah." He pointed his fork at me. "Good. Means you've got patience. You'll need that in here." Patience. I didn't have much left. Ronan noticed the way my hand shook when loud noises hit the block. He saw the tension in my jaw when someone bumped into me. He understood the silence I lived in, the kind that eats your thoughts alive. He didn't drown me with advice or pity. He offered presence, which is rarer in prison than food. One afternoon during rec, he tossed me a paperback manual on basic electrical repair. "Start with this," he said. "Keeps your mind busy. Idle brains rot fast in here." At first, I read it just to be polite. But something about the diagrams, the precision, the logic. It felt like breathing for the first time in months. Machines made sense in a way people didn't. Wires didn't lie. Circuits didn't betray you. Every night, I studied under the buzzing cell light until my eyes burned. Ronan would occasionally glance down from the top bunk and grumble, "Good. Keep going." Weeks turned into months. He began teaching me more, quietly, casually. How to stay unseen when tempers flared. Who to avoid. What routines kept you alive. How to fight if you had no choice, and how to walk away when that choice could cost you years. But the most important lesson he ever gave me came one night when I admitted the truth out loud for the first time. "I didn't do it, Ronan. I swear I didn't touch that woman." He didn't laugh. Didn't doubt. Didn't ask for details. He just said, "Not everyone in here is guilty, kid. But everyone in here is punished. Learn to live with that without letting it turn you into something you're not." That sentence carved itself into me. He was the first person, the only person, who treated me like a man who'd been wronged, not a monster wearing human skin. Years passed. My hands grew steadier. My mind grew sharper. I earned certifications through prison programs, soaked up knowledge like it was the last thing keeping me alive. The trade I learned became armor, discipline, identity. Ronan called it survival. I didn't know yet it would become my revenge. The day they released me was colder than the day they locked me up. Not weather cold, empty cold. The kind that settles in your bones because there's nothing left to warm you. They handed me a plastic bag with the clothes I'd worn 10 years earlier. The shirt hung loose on my thinner frame, the jeans stiff from age. My boots didn't fit right anymore. I didn't fit right anymore. At the gate, a guard clipped off my wristband and said, "Good luck." Not kindness, routine. I was just another body leaving the system. There was no one waiting for me. My mother didn't come. Lena didn't come. Not even a distant cousin with awkward condolences. Just a road, a bus stop, and the world that had moved on without me. I tried calling my mother from a payphone. The number was disconnected. I tried Lena next. It rang twice, then straight to voicemail. She'd changed her greeting, bright, cheerful, unscarred. The sound of her voice felt like a blade slipping between my ribs. With nowhere else to go, I had a cheap room in a rundown motel on the edge of town. The kind of place where no one asks questions because no one wants answers. The walls were yellowed from old cigarette smoke. The bed sagged in the middle. The air smelled like mildew and bleach, fighting for dominance. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at my hands. 10 years. 10 years gone. 10 years taken. The job at the auto shop? Filled years ago. My old landlord? Sold the building. My friends? Married, moved, or simply uninterested in resurrecting someone the world had already buried. I was free, but freedom felt like a joke. Prison had structure. Predictability. Out here, I was a ghost haunting the ruins of my own life. Still, Ronan's voice echoed in my head. Learn to live without letting this place turn you into something you're not. Maybe he understood something I hadn't yet, that survival outside meant rebuilding from ash, not waiting for some invisible hand to restore what had been taken. So the next morning, with a resume nobody wanted and a record nobody believed was unfair, I walked into a community workshop program. They offered training in electrical repair, the same trade I'd devoured in my cell. When they asked if I had experience, I said, "A little." And for the first time since the gavel fell, I felt a small spark inside me. Not hope, not yet, but potential. A direction. Because the system had taken 10 years from me. But it had also given me a skill. And I had every intention of using it. The workshop became the only place where my name didn't taste bitter in someone else's mouth. Nobody there knew my past, not at first, and I didn't offer it. I kept my head down, arrived early, stayed late, and treated every circuit board like it was the only thing tethering me to the earth. Because it was. What started as mechanical repetition slowly became something sharper, almost obsessive. I needed mastery not for pride, not for ambition, but for survival. When your old identity is poisoned, you build a new one from whatever scraps you can hold. Days blurred into weeks. My instructors noticed the way I absorbed information, how I'd study schematics past closing, how I'd stay behind to rebuild broken equipment no one else wanted to touch. They assumed I was driven. They didn't know I was rebuilding a man from the inside out. At night, I rented a small basement room behind a laundromat. It smelled like detergent and damp concrete, but it gave me space to think, to work, to breathe without feeling watched. I bought old appliances from junk shops, radios, heaters, fans, anything broken. I tore them apart and put them back together until the inner workings felt as familiar as my own pulse. Piece by piece, something shifted. I wasn't just learning a trade anymore. I was constructing a new version of myself, one that no courtroom could crush, one that no detective could bury. My first real job came 6 months later, a small electrical repair position with a contractor who cared more about results than background checks. He didn't hire me because he believed in me. He hired me because I worked like a man who had nothing left to lose. And he was right. I saved every dollar. Bought better tools. Earned certifications. Took night classes. Studied until my hands cramped and my mind throbbed. I wasn't just catching up to the world, I was learning to outrun it. But it wasn't until my boss sent me alone to fix a faulty system in a corporate office building that I realized how far I'd come. While tracing a wiring fault through a wall panel, I overheard two executives whispering about an internal audit. Something about old cases resurfacing and a detective under scrutiny. A name I hadn't heard spoken in years drifted through that vent like a spark hitting dry tinder. Hale. The air left my lungs. For the first time in a decade, the world tilted in my direction, not with mercy, but with possibility. I didn't know what was happening to him yet. But I knew this much. Corruption doesn't stay buried forever. And the man who stole my life was finally standing on cracking ground. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the overheard conversation, those two executives whispering Hale's name like it was radioactive. For years, I'd forced myself not to imagine this moment. The moment something, anything, would finally shake the foundation he'd built on my ruined life. But now that it was here, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt electric. Dangerous. Like holding a live wire in my bare hands. I started digging quietly. I read news articles at the public library, scrolling through archives until my eyes blurred. At first, nothing. Then a headline buried halfway down an old local page. Community complaints filed against Detective Marcus Hale, internal review pending. The article was sterile, vague, the kind of peace departments feed reporters to keep them satisfied without revealing anything real. But the comments below told a different story. People murmuring about mishandled evidence. Witnesses pressured. Suspects coerced. A pattern. A method. The same smile he gave me when he pushed the confession across the table. The more I dug, the more it became clear he hadn't just framed me. I was one of several. Maybe not framed for the same reason, maybe not with the same brutality, but Hale's cases had cracks. Cracks his department had ignored until someone finally complained loud enough. And whoever complained, they'd started a landslide. Still, there's a difference between rumors and proof. I needed something concrete. It came from a place I never expected. One afternoon, while repairing wiring in a small accounting office, the owner, soft-spoken woman in her 60s, offered me a cup of coffee. She said I looked tired. I didn't argue. As she set the cup down, she studied my face with a strangely familiar recognition. "You look like someone who's had dealings with law enforcement," she said gently. I froze. Before I could respond, she added, "My nephew. Hale worked his case. Ruined the boy's life. And now they're saying the detective may have fabricated things." Fabricated. She said it so casually, as if the word didn't have the power to crush or resurrect someone. I swallowed hard. "You think he did it on purpose?" She nodded, bitterness sharpening her features. "Some men like control more than justice." Control. Yes. Hale never cared about justice. He cared about the thrill of shaping a narrative, bending truth until it snapped. Walking home, cold air scraping my lungs, it hit me. Hale wasn't untouchable anymore. People were talking. Departments were probing. Secrets were leaking. And for the first time, the fear was on his side of the table. I wasn't imagining it. The armor he'd wrapped around himself was cracking, quietly, slowly, but undeniably. I didn't know then how quickly those cracks would widen. How fast his world would collapse. Or how soon he'd be the one standing on my doorstep. Shaking. The first real confirmation didn't come from a headline or a witness. It came from the shift in the way people looked at me. I'd lived a decade in the shadow of a label I couldn't peel off. Every job interview, every landlord, every stranger on the street. I could feel their judgment before I opened my mouth. But now something subtle was changing. Not sympathy, curiosity. It started when an attorney named Julia Raines walked into the repair shop where I'd been subcontracting. She wasn't there for legal work. She needed the electrical panel in her office fixed. But the moment she heard my name, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Daniel Ward?" she asked. "From the Hale case?" My stomach tightened. "Yeah." She set her purse down slowly, like she was handling something fragile. "I've been reviewing some of Hale's older files. I think there may have been irregularities in your case." Irregularities. That was the polite word for what he did. "Why are you looking into it?" I asked. Julia hesitated. Then, quietly, "Because two other men he arrested were recently exonerated. One through DNA evidence. One because Hale was caught falsifying a witness statement." She swallowed. "And I think your case might be worse." Worse. The word hit me like a punch to the sternum. She asked if I'd be willing to meet with an investigator. I agreed, though part of me expected this to go nowhere. False hope is a poison I'd swallowed enough of in my life. But then she said something that stopped me cold. Hale has been suspended. Internal Affairs reopened nearly a dozen of his cases last month. He hasn't been seen in court in weeks. Suspended. The man who once walked into my interrogation room with swagger and certainty. Stripped of his badge. The gears were turning faster than I realized. That night, I couldn't sit still. I walked aimlessly through the city, the cold biting at my hands, my breath visible in the streetlights. The world felt charged, almost humming. And as I replayed everything, my trial, the planted evidence, his smug smile, I realized something I'd never allowed myself to consider. Truth has a smell. It hangs thick in the air right before a lie collapses. And for the first time, the air around Hellenbrook felt different, like a storm building just beyond the horizon. 2 days later, the investigator Julia mentioned contacted me. We met in a cramped office above a bakery, the smell of bread mixing with the metallic scent of old file cabinets. He placed a manila folder on the table. We're reviewing every case Hale touched. Yours stands out. He opened the folder. And there it was, the knife. Or rather, a high-resolution photo of it, the knife Hale had claimed held my fingerprints. Except now, under proper analysis, something had surfaced. Prints layered in a pattern inconsistent with normal handling. Smudged. Pressed. Artificial. You're telling me he planted them? I asked. I'm telling you they didn't get there naturally. My pulse hammered. Then he showed me a second document, a statement from a witness who had recanted, saying Hale pressured him to identify me in a lineup. Every piece was sliding into place, every lie unraveling, every truth rising like smoke from a long-smothered fire. I walked out of that office shaking. Not from fear, from the realization that the ground beneath Hale was no longer cracking. It was caving in. And soon he would fall straight through. Justice doesn't arrive like thunder. It comes quietly at first, a shift in tone, a question asked twice instead of once, a name spoken with less confidence than before. But once it starts moving, once it truly wakes up, it becomes something unstoppable. The morning everything changed, I got a call from Julia. Daniel, they're reopening your case. Officially. The world around me went still. Cars passed. Dogs barked. Someone laughed across the street. But inside me, everything froze. They wouldn't do that unless they found something substantial, she added. Substantial. That word carried the weight of 10 years. She asked me to come to the courthouse. When I walked through those glass doors, memories hit me like blunt force. The hallway where Lena once held my hand, the bench where my mother prayed without looking at me, the room where the jury wouldn't meet my eyes. This time I walked in alone. But not as the man they buried. As the man I had rebuilt. Inside a small conference room, 3 people waited: Julia, the investigator, and a deputy district attorney with tired eyes and a stack of folders. He gestured for me to sit. Mr. Ward, he began, clearing his throat, we're reviewing multiple cases linked to Detective Marcus Hale. Yours appears to contain significant procedural issues. Procedural issues? A polite way of saying corruption. He slid a file toward me. The fingerprints on the knife do not match natural deposition patterns. Additionally, the original witness has recanted, claiming he was pressured by Detective Hale. Pressed. Coerced. Manipulated. Just like I always knew. And, he continued, flipping through pages, we've recovered internal notes Hale hid from the prosecution. They point to an alternative suspect who was never followed up on. My skin prickled. So what happens now? I asked. The prosecutor took a slow breath, the kind that precedes something irreversible. A hearing will be scheduled. If the judge agrees with our findings, your conviction will be vacated. Vacated. A word that felt too light for the magnitude of what it meant. 10 years of my life erased, corrected, undone, not in terms of time, but truth. But justice is never just about being right. It's about what the truth does to the people who built their power on lies. As I left the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps, shouting Hale's name, demanding statements, chasing anyone who looked like they knew something. The headline the next morning read: Detective Marcus Hale under investigation for evidence tampering, multiple convictions in question. His downfall was accelerating faster than anyone expected. Colleagues distanced themselves, former supervisors issued carefully crafted statements. The department scrambled to control the narrative. And somewhere out there, for the first time in his life, Marcus Hale felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. He'd framed innocent men. He'd destroyed families. He'd built his career on manipulation disguised as justice. But justice had finally stretched, yawned, and opened its eyes. The storm I had waited a decade for was no longer on the horizon. It was here. And it was coming for him. It happened on a Thursday night. The kind of night where nothing feels significant. I'd just finished repairing a fuse box in the basement and was climbing the stairs to my room when I heard it. A knock. Not loud. Not steady. Uneven, almost weak. I froze halfway up the steps. No one visited me. No one even knew where I lived unless I told them, and I rarely told anyone. Another knock. This one sharper. Frantic. My pulse picked up. I tightened my grip on the railing and approached the door slowly. "Who is it?" I called out. No answer. Just breathing, ragged, shaky, desperate. I opened the door 2 inches enough to see a sliver of the hallway. And my blood went cold. Marcus Hale stood there. But not the Hale I remembered, not the arrogant detective with the confident stride and the smirking certainty. This man was hollowed out. His hair was unkempt, his eyes bloodshot, his coat soaked from rain. His hands trembled visibly. He looked afraid. "Ward," he whispered, voice cracking. "Please, let me in." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. I just stared at the man who had ruined me, the man whose lies had caged me, the man who had watched my life burn without blinking. "What are you doing here?" I finally asked, voice flat. He flinched at my tone, like he expected a bullet instead of a sentence. "They're after me," he said. I don't know who exactly. Someone connected to those old cases. Someone who wants me gone." I opened the door a little wider, studying him, the bruised cheek, the torn sleeve, the panic swirling behind his eyes. He was unraveling from the inside out. "You're a cop," I said. "Call for backup." "I'm not a cop anymore," he snapped, then lowered his voice. "Suspended. Pending termination." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "I have no one else to go to." A laugh slipped out of me, harsh, humorless. "You picked the wrong man. 10 years too late." Hale stepped closer, his breath shaky. "Daniel, listen. I know what I did. I know what it cost you. But right now, someone wants me dead. And you're the only person who..." "Who what?" I cut in. "Who owes you something? Who should feel sorry for you?" His silence confirmed the truth. He still believed the world revolved around his choices, that even now, even stripped of power, he could lean on the man he destroyed. "Why come to me?" I asked. "Why not a friend? A colleague? Your family?" He looked down, ashamed. "They all turned their backs. The department won't protect me. My wife took the kids and left. Everyone thinks I'm guilty of everything." Good. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of isolation, the same crushing, suffocating void he had forced onto others. I stepped out into the hallway, letting the cold air settle between us. "You framed me," I said quietly. "You knew I was innocent. You planted evidence. You robbed me of 10 years. Hale's eyes filled, his composure cracking. "I know. God, I know. But please, Daniel. I'm begging you. Help me." Begging? The same man who once told me to confess to a crime I never touched was now standing in front of me with shaking hands, stripped of superiority, stripped of pride, stripped of the armor he once used to crush people like me. For a moment, I just looked at him. Really looked at him. And I saw the perfect symmetry. He had taken everything from me when I had no power. Now he had none. And I was the one with a choice. I leaned close enough for him to hear the bitterness in my breath. "I'll help you," I whispered. "But not the way you think." His eyes widened, hope flickering where fear had lived. And I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked past me, unaware that by crossing that threshold, he had just placed his fate entirely in my hands. Exactly where it belonged, Hale stepped into my small basement room like a man entering a sanctuary, not realizing he'd walked straight into judgment. He hovered near the center, dripping rain onto the concrete floor, eyes darting around for threats that weren't there. "Is anyone following you?" I asked. He shook his head, breath shaking. I don't think so.
I ran through alleys, doubled back, took side streets.
I've been getting messages. Threats. They know where I live. They know where my kids go to school. His voice cracked on the last word. 10 years ago, that might have moved me. Tonight, it didn't. I handed him a towel. He took it with both hands, like it was a lifeline. Thank you, he whispered. Sit, I said. He obeyed. For a moment, I just watched him, the man who once held all the power reduced to a trembling shadow. He'd carved me open and walked away without a backward glance. And now he needed me. Me. Justice, I realized, wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it arrived in shivering breaths and lowered eyes. Tell me everything, I said. And he did. He spilled every secret he'd kept buried, the suspect he'd coerced, the informant he'd threatened, the evidence he'd rearranged to fit the story he wanted. Not just my case, dozens. He talked for nearly an hour, unraveling himself like an old rope. When he finally stopped, he buried his face in his hands. I'm going to die, Daniel, he whispered. Unless someone helps me. I stood. And the fear in his eyes told me he understood. I was no longer the man he framed. I wasn't fragile, or desperate, or broken. I was rebuilt, steady, controlled, and dangerous in a way he had never anticipated. You want my help, I said. Fine. I'll give it. He exhaled with relief so deep it almost made me laugh. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number, Julia's. When she answered, I said only, I have Hale. A long silence. Then, bring him in. But I didn't move. Instead, I turned the phone's recorder on and set it on the table in front of him. Hale, I said, repeat everything you just told me. His eyes snapped up. What? No, Daniel, I trusted you. You trusted me the same way I trusted you the night you planted evidence and destroyed my life? His mouth opened, closed, trembled. Say it again, I said. Or walk back outside and take your chances with whoever's hunting you. He broke. He confessed again. Every detail. Every lie. Every manipulation. Every crime. His voice shook. Mine didn't. When he finished, I sent the recording to Julia, the investigator, and the deputy district attorney. Then I looked him dead in the eyes. You're going to walk into the courthouse with me tomorrow, I said. You're going to repeat this in front of them. And when they ask why you did it, you're going to tell the truth. Hale swallowed hard. And, what happens to me? I leaned down, meeting his terrified gaze. You go to prison for the years you stole from men who never touched a crime scene. You face every consequence you thought your badge would protect you from. And you pray the system treats you better than you treated us. His voice dropped to a whisper. Daniel. Please. I'm not your priest, I said coldly. I'm the man you buried. And now I'm the one holding the match. The next morning, I walked him into the courthouse myself. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, people shouted questions. Hale kept his head down, but not to hide, to avoid collapsing. Inside, the DA played the recording. Hale broke on the stand. He confessed to everything. My conviction was vacated in a matter of hours. And the city issued a formal apology, public, televised, undeniable. They awarded me compensation that didn't even begin to touch what I'd lost, but it was a debt paid nonetheless. As for Hale, he was sentenced. Stripped of everything. Left to rot in the same kind of cell he once shoved innocent men into. I never visited him. Justice didn't require it. Because the world finally knew the truth. My name was restored. And the man who framed me ended exactly where he belonged. Sometimes revenge is fire. Sometimes it's ice. Mine was both.